All right, it's 9:02. We'll go ahead and get started. And again, good morning. It's a beautiful morning here in Spokane, sunny blue skies and wonderful weather, and looking forward to the day. We have a few things on our agenda this morning, starting off with a discussion about the fiscal year 2021 reforecast budget. I understand Treasurer Dan Clark and CFO Perez are going to lead that discussion. And so with that, I will turn it over to them. The materials for that discussion are in your materials at page 430 and late materials 126.
Awesome. Well, I'll take it from here. First and foremost, I wanted to thank everybody who was involved in the process. I mean, just to describe a little bit of how this reforecast process happens, it's not only an exercise that we do internally at the bar, but we go through the process of consultation with the treasurer as we move along in order to shift assumptions and not surprise anybody when it comes to the budget and audit committee, where we already presented this reforecast. But at the end of the day, it's a very, very collaborative effort involving everyone on the finance team, everyone on the executive leadership team. Tara and her wisdom is bestowed upon this as much as is Dan. So this is a very big collaborative effort to get all this done. A person that's responsible is one of the important people players here is Elizabeth Wick. She's not with us today because she's on vacation this week. So good for her. Well deserved. So yeah, Rex, you can kick it off whenever you'd like. Thank you. All right, let's go to the first slide. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Reforecast fund balances and where we are right now. All in all, okay, one of the things before I start, let me just give you a little bit of a preview of something that came to my attention yesterday, which were the March results. This reforecast is based on February results, not on March, but March results look very, very favorable to what we have here, to the tone of maybe $300,000 positive that in the month of March. So I don't have any of the detail underneath it in terms to be able to separate it because we're still in that process. But a good preliminary number is that we will be in the month of March heading north of $300,000 to the positive. So with that said, let's go. What this schedule does, if you look at the top blue column, you'll see the general fund, CPF fund, CLE fund, and sections. And what this does is it lays out, starting with the fund balances that we had as of 9/30/2020, right? And then we do the revenue reforecast. So the revenue reforecast for the general fund is 20,227,000. And that's broken out in licensing revenue of 16,218,000 and other revenue of 4 million. The CPF fund has a revenue reforecast of 533 and the CLE fund of 1,353,029. The expenses for the general fund are at 20,341,457. Okay. So we'll see then the CPF fund expenses are at 651,922, with the CLE fund at 1,609,791. And you can see the breakdown there of direct and indirect expenses. So the net income or loss that's being reforecast here is $114,000 to the negative for the general fund, $118,000 negative for the CPF fund, the CLE fund with $256,762 negative, and the sections budget at $279,389, which is the same number that was budgeted. We did not reforecast the sections. And the reason we don't reforecast the sections is because it's very complicated, because given that they're very dichotomized and all over the place, we don't have the time in the planning time frame of the Reforecast to go out to the sections and have them returned to us. So we just left them as is, as per the budget. So this gives us the Reforecast balances for the general fund at $3,364,000, the CPF fund at $4,074,000, and the CLE fund at $212,479. Okay, I'm ignoring the sections for now. Which means that compared to the budgeted balance that we had for each one of those funds, the general fund is showing in the Reforecast an incremental $88,670 in balances. In other words, an improvement over the budget for that amount. The CPF fund shows an improvement of $10,039, and the CLE fund, which we'll talk about later on in more detail, of negative $194,603. Then down to the bottom left, you see the operating reserve fund and the facilities fund. Both of those are the restricted portions of the general fund. And total cash impact for net income impact for all the funds together, it's $95,895 negative.
Mr. Perez.
Yes, sir.
So at the top of this, we have the fund balances. And I want to know, because it seems like the information you provide below does not include or carry over the fund balances. Am I correct or incorrect?
No, that would not be correct. The fund balances of the $3,478,234 beginning plus the $88,670 is what gives us the it's what gives us the $3,364,142, which is the Reforecast balance here. And then we take the 375 and we compare that to the budget, which was $3,275,472.
Okay. So the information includes the fund balance or not?
Yes, it does, because if you take 3,478,000, which is the initial balance, right? 478, and you subtract from that 114, that gives you the 3,364,000, which is the Reforecast balance.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So the key issues impacting the Reforecast are the CLE revenue. The CLE revenue was reduced by $487,000, and Director Platchey will talk about this later on in a little bit more detail. But basically, that's driven by the 2020 MCLE extension. It's also driven by COVID-19 in-person programs, seminars, and sorry, I repeated in-person programs there twice. And that's also curbed the revenue portion of the CLE fund. Now, this has been partially offset by CLE expenses that have been reduced by $292,000. So it's not like the CLE fund is standing idle. Director Platchey and his team have done a great job in trying to curb the expenses in that fund, given how much they're being impacted on the top line. Then we have the general fund. It shouldn't read net income positive. It should read net fund positive of $89,000, which I mentioned in the previous slide, and the CPF net fund positive of $10,000. Next one. So this is the detail of those numbers. So this is the general fund. So we see that one of the things that's impacting the general fund is revenue. We are short in revenue versus the original budget by roughly $375,000. Okay, that is mostly driven by late fees, which we assumed at 30%, and it came in closer to 15%. So that's one of the biggest revenue variance on the general fund. But we also have offsetting expenses, which are mostly driven by salaries and open positions, staff travel, parking, speaker and program development, and facilities. So we have plenty of offsetting expenses, and that's why you can see on the table to the left, you see the 375 shortage in revenue, but you also see the $464,000 reduction in expenses, which the difference between those two, it's what provides us the $88,000 variance that we were speaking to. And there's the 114,092 of the reforecast that you saw on the first slide. Next slide.
Jorge, I had a question there for you.
Sure. Can you go back, please?
Yes, please. And thank you. I'm just curious, why is it that we are, as a budget item, and this may not be the right time to ask this, but why are we assuming that there will always be late fees, as opposed to assuming everybody will pay on time, and this would be a surplus later on? Because it seems to presume that we're relying upon late fees as part of the budget, and I don't quite understand that. So, do you explain? That'd be great.
It's based on historicals.
Understood that. Yeah, I understand that, but each year is going to be different, I would assume.
Well, actually, it's not that different. This is the first year that actually it's been a little bit off, but usually it's pretty predictable.
Okay.
And I think that one of the things that happened was that we being the collective we in finance, may have erred in assuming the percent, because it does look like a little bit larger than what we've had historically, that what we planned. So, granted, we may have missed something there, but generally speaking, late fees are projected based on historical.
Okay, thank you.
Past, yeah. Okay. So the CLE fund, I'll just read off the numbers and then I'll pass it off to Kevin so he can speak to these things. But here are the numbers that we spoke to. Here's the revenue drop of 486,971, the expense improvement of 292, which gives us the variance in net income of 194,603 negative. Those are very big numbers for that fund. But the good part is that let's not forget that the fund still has a balance, a projected ending balance of over $200,000. And this is what the fund is there for, right? It's to absorb these type of issues that may happen that were not predictable, even though we knew we were in the times of COVID, but we really didn't understand what that could be, and different types of court decisions that happened after we started the budget also impacted. With that said, I'm going to pass it on to Kevin with the next slide, starting with the next slide. Rex.
Thank you, Jorge.
You bet.
Next slide, Rex. All right, so I'm just going to quickly go over a few things. One, the first being the impacts on financial results due to COVID. Then I'll talk a little bit about what steps we've taken to mitigate those results. And finally, I'll talk about the outlook for the CLE fund moving forward. So first of all, the impacts on the financial results, most of them are occurring because of the MCLE certification extension for 2020. That reporting group does not need to complete CLE reporting until the end of 2021. The impact that had on our on-demand revenue was very significant. The last 2 months of the year, which are November and December, are the highest on-demand revenue months that we earn on the CLE store. Generally, in those 2 months, we earn around $365,000, but this year's earnings were $58,000. That was a $307,000 shortfall just in 2 months. Additionally, live seminar revenue is trending downward by about $175,000. The reason for that is we're still doing the same number of programs. We're doing them all remotely, however. And the impact that has is that generally we charge a little bit lower fees for those programs. The attendance varies a little bit, and the larger mid-year programs, which are a great portion of our live revenue, are not happening at all. So those are sort of the impacts on the live seminar revenue. We are seeing over the last couple months that attendance at live seminars are picking up. So that's hopefully good news for the outcome overall. So we're hoping it's going to be a little bit more positive than we're projecting with the current trends over the last month or so. So essentially, the bottom line is the CLE cost center was budgeted to earn $107,000, but is now forecasted to lose around $60-some thousand. Next slide, Rex. So actions taken to mitigate the impacts. As soon as we saw that on-demand sales had fallen so significantly, the first step we took was to think about ways to increase the on-demand sales revenue. Historically, we run a summer sale in the sort of July, August timeframe for our on-demand programs. And that generally does quite well for us. It spurs a lot of demand in a low demand month. What we decided to do is run two more sales campaigns for the on-demand store this year. We ran a February winter sale. That's already concluded. That resulted in approximately $100,000 increase in revenue in our February financials. We are almost ready to deploy a spring sale that will run the end of this month into May. And we're expecting similar results for that. So we're hoping another 100,000 increase can come from there, which is helping to curb off some of that loss that I talked about. Direct cost in live seminar development decreased significantly by $270,000. The majority of those costs were associated with facility savings. As I had mentioned before, we're not doing the very large mid-year programs that we normally do. That's bad for revenue, but it's good for cost savings. So a lot of the cost savings we're seeing are savings associated with not doing those larger programs in person. There's also speakers and program development savings. That's where we reimburse speakers for travel expenses. And when we're doing in-person programs, we have those significantly, but they've over the remote environment, we don't really have as many of those costs. And then print marketing cost is a fairly significant savings for these larger events that we do. We were also able to negotiate out of 5 fairly large venue contracts that we had already entered into a couple years before, because we typically contract for these larger events a couple years out. And all of those contracts we were able to negotiate out of with no penalties. And probably the most significant thing we're doing that I just want to thank our CLE team for is keeping production of seminars going in the remote environment. So as I mentioned before, we're doing the same amount of programs, and that's important for the long view, because all of our live programs get converted into on-demand programs. So if we weren't continuing to do the programming as robustly as we are now, we would not be building that inventory for our on-demand store for future sales opportunities. So that's very key and very significant for the outlook. And then we did have an education programs lead who left the organization a couple months ago for another opportunity. And we decided to go ahead and freeze hiring of that position through August. So we've shuffled some things around. We're not doing a few programs that are not quite as directly associated with the CLE fund, and we're moving resources into really doing most of our programming that will support the fund through the rest of the year. So we have freezed hiring of that position through August. Next slide, Rex.
Kevin, can I ask a question before you move on?
Yes.
This is Nancy. The 2 sales that you referenced in the last slide.
Yes.
I assume that sections are going to share the revenue from those on-demand sales. And I wondered if you had an estimate of that, or if you've already taken that into account in the $100,000 figure you used?
Yeah, we've taken it into account. That includes the gross sales, Nancy. So that's not broken out whether it was a section CLE or not. But when we do the splits to sections, all the revenue that's earned, regardless of how it's earned on a section seminar, is rolled into that calculation. So when we do your splits, that revenue that's associated with whatever seminars sold during that period of time will be included.
And that'll be in 2022?
What's earned this year, the splits will be paid first quarter of FY22. Yes.
All right, I'll talk to you privately as you know those numbers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Jorge's already gone over sort of the impact to the fund, but the fund balance is going to end up still with a little right at or a little over 200,000, I believe, in it after the year is completed. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and Jorge's already addressed this, but the CLE fund is really there to buffer us from market fluctuations and kind of uncontrollable external things that happen like they could to any business. And, you know, I don't want to refer to this as a business, but it is a self-sustaining operation that's really subject to market, to influences from the market. So the fund is there to protect us from those things when they occur. And the COVID pandemic is a classic example of an external force that we don't control, that this is doing its job to protect us from. But we do have opportunities to rebuild. Because we didn't have a reporting group last year, we now have 2 reporting groups coming into 2021. So we suspect that on-demand sales coming up into November and December of this year will be more robust than prior years, because we've got 2 markets, we've got 2 reporting groups that are going to be shopping for CLEs. So that pent-up demand should be a positive influence for us. And as I said, we're still producing programs and we're keeping our stock of on-demand inventory up, which is going to pay dividends to us in the future. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation on the CLE fund balance. I'm happy to take any questions.
Governor Dresden.
Thanks, President Cicchetti. And thanks for that presentation, Kevin. I just have a quick question in terms of the building up the inventory. What's the sort of expected shelf life? How long are these recorded CLEs and inventory expected to sort of be money makers and viable?
So every on-demand CLE that we place on the store has a 3-year shelf life. So it has a 3-year sales cycle. Most of about 70% probably of the sales on an on-demand seminar are earned during the first year and a half. What we saw, and the reason we settled on 3 years, is by about halfway through the 3rd year, sales really plummet because of the aging of the seminar. So that's why we went with a 3-year sales cycle, because we saw in general that sales really fell off as you neared the 3-year mark.
Okay. Great. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was that in this reforecast, we have included 2 net new positions. And by net, I mean that they are netted against a position that's being eliminated from the current roster, which is an administration position, which is an office services person that happened to report to me when I got here, and we never backfilled that position. So that position is going to be eliminated, and it's going to be netted against one of these 3 positions that we are adding here. We're adding an IT developer 2. We're adding the member wellness program lead that this board has spoken to us about. So we're taking action on that. And also an MCLE analyst. And there on the right side, you can see the annual salaries, the benefits estimated at 30%, and the total annualized cost of these positions, including benefits, which are basically $260,000 on an annualized basis before the net amount. Then we also have the 2001 impact, because the 2001, it should be 2021, sorry about that. The 2021 impact, I guess I'm living in the past, of 9 months. One starts in month 9, another starts in month 10, and another starts in month 7, as we have them reforecast here. So that means that the 2021 impact is roughly $68,250. Now, because of the net effect of this position, which is $52,891, is the total of the position being eliminated. And because this position was planned for the year but not refilled, that means that the 2021 impact of this will be $15,360 after the elimination of the office services position. In addition, from an annualized basis, this reduces the impact by the same $52,891 into next year. So that means that the actual net impact is $207,110. Now, in addition to that, we are eliminating, as part of the program, the WASPA Connect contract that goes out by virtue of hiring this member wellness program lead. We can eliminate this WASPA Connect contract, which is valued at $43,000 annually. So the math isn't there, but if you take the total $207,000 impact for next year, you subtract from that the $43,000, you will get the $164,000, which is really the net impact after the elimination of the WASPA Connect contract. So that's how much it will be added to next year as a result of the net of these 3 positions, plus the net savings obtained via the elimination of the WASPA Connect contract. Below that, in the smaller print, you can see the rationale for the 3 positions that are being added: the IT developer, the clinician, and the MCLE analyst. So you can see there the justifications in short form of what they are and why we're applying for these positions. Any questions on that?
I've got a question.
Governor Higginson.
We just talked about the fact that things are not in the CLE world moving as we'd hoped because of COVID, but now we have a note here that there's an increase in workload. I don't know if that's something that you can address, Jorge, or.
Yeah, it's because this isn't for the CLE. This is for the MCLE. This is not that area.
Okay, so there's an increase, and why is there an increase in workload for the MCLE?
I think I don't have that answer, but I know Hinata is on the line. I don't know if she's ready to talk to that, but if not, we'll more than happy get you that answer.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what has happened that has caused an increase in that particular area.
Hinata, would you like to comment on that, or do you want to address that later?
I'll be happy to cover it. Yeah.
Okay, shoot for it.
Yeah. So the MCLE staff, there has been a decrease in FTE over time. So back in 2016, we actually had 4 FTE, and then we started to decrease that and went to 3.5, 3.5 in 17, and 3 FTE in 2020. And at the same time we were decreasing FTE, the workload was increasing, and a lot of that was related to the rule changes to APR 11. So in 2016, there were quite a few amendments made to APR 11, increasing the ways member could obtain credit. So as you know, CLE actual like attending a course is not the only way to obtain CLE credit. Members can get credit for attending law school courses, teaching, providing pro bono services, mentoring, judging law school competitions, writing. So there's a variety of ways members can obtain credit. And at the same time, all those changes were being implemented, and limited practice offices and OOTs were added to APR 11 as well. We shifted things internally in our department to compensate for the increasing need in the admission system department. So that means that person that was split between MCLE and admissions became full-time admissions. And we initially thought we were going to be able to fill that gap with temporary staff. We usually get temporary staff anyway during our busy season, which is licensing, to be able to review all of the certifications that we get from members. But we are seeing that that's no longer a possibility. So we set our own standard to review applications, and that is a 2-week period. And we are falling behind that standard of review. And, that creates frustration, members and sponsors. So in terms of numbers, the number of courses, actual courses we have been reviewing increased from fiscal year 17 to fiscal year 20, about 1,500 more applications we've been seeing. And we just need to get back the FTE that we lost. Essentially, that's the answer to that question. The program is not intended to bring revenue to the bar. It's intended to be self-sufficient. And under APR 11D, I believe, the MCLE board is responsible for setting fees that will defray the costs of running the program, administering the rules set by the court. The fees are approved by the BOG. And if you look at the past 10 years, or even less, I think the past 8 years, the program has brought over $1 million to the bar. So I think the program has enough there to cover the additional staff. So I don't think that would be an issue in terms of self-sufficiency. But I'm happy to answer other questions.
No, thank you. That was a very good, thorough explanation. I appreciate it.
Governor Pertzer. You're on mute, Governor Pertzer.
Good morning. Thank you. I'm just curious for either Hanada or Jorge or both. Has there been any thought about outsourcing these positions for the purpose of saving the benefits? Because that in and of itself would save about $60,000 a year. And just curious if that's one, if it's feasible or if it's been considered.
We have not had conversation around that. Maybe there are probably some operational reasons why we don't want to go in that direction. But having said that, in my experience, just in different positions, when you outsource, you replace the benefits for the fees that you have to pay for the outsourcing services. So net, you may save something, but usually not significant when you go in that direction. And you do lose substantial control over the processes that you have. So I can't speak to the processes per se. I would allow Renata to do that if she wishes. But we have not lined up a business model that says this versus that. I'm just speaking by anecdotally to you.
Sure. Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, well, that I believe is the last slide. No, we have one more. And this is one of the mitigating strategies that we have. And I want to really play up Chief Nagowski's role here, and one of her staff people, Margaret Morgan, who really gave themselves the task of how to improve desk book profitability. They have undertaken a process where we are outsourcing the desk books arrangement for procuring these and selling these in order to reduce both publishing costs, obsolescence of the desk books, and overall costs within the cost center. And our model shows that on an annualized basis, once the run rate is achieved say in 12 to 15 months, we will be saving about $100,000 in that cost center per year as a result of this. So I think this was great. And if Chief Nagowski wants to speak to it a little bit, feel free to toot her horn, because there's no better storyteller on our staff than Sarah. And that's storyteller in the good sense of the word.
Well, I mean, this really goes back for those of you who remember several years ago. Deskbooks has always just been, it is, I think, a really mission-driven product for the bar, because it takes our most expert folks in the law and we project manage and edit that into these desk books that really become the leading authority, and they're quoted in cases and they're used, and hopefully you see them on the shelves when you travel throughout the state. And so really what we do at WSBA really well is support, project manage, bring forth, and help those experts really give back to the legal community. What has always been an issue, because it's just not our area of expertise, and because of just scaling, is the printing, the warehousing, the actual physical goods of these desk books. So several years ago, we began talking about this through budget audit and the board. And I remember one of the governors basically said, well, there's so many print on demand services now. And so what does that look like? And, we really took that seriously. It's kind of a new world with new partnerships available. And so we went out to see who in our area, in legal printing, in the legal world, really could do this at a scale and would be interested in working with us. And Margaret Morgan is really the person on my team. She's the senior legal editor with more than 20 years of experience, really shepherding and building the relationships behind these. And now she's kind of formed this new contract. And really, because a lot of folks say, it's LexisNexis, what does that mean? But in essence, what has happened is that WSBA's going to do what we're really good at, which is the content, which is the checking, which is the citation, which is making sure these are really credible, good books. We're going to be able to do that at a faster production rate and do a lot of those things that we are having to outsource in-house, because what LexisNexis is going to do is basically be our printer and the print on demand. And because they can do that at a much different scale, and that's their business. As Jorge said, I'm looking, desk books have never been set up to be revenue making. They just are very intensive to create. And again, we're just not selling millions and millions of them. But what I can say is that we're looking at going from about 2015 till currently, the cost to make overall, the cost has run probably in about the $150,000 range, and given give this like Jorge said, the run through to transition over, I think we project to be revenue neutral, which I think is pretty fantastic. The other benefits that come with LexisNexis is they put their marketing efforts behind it, and as many of you probably know, that goes to a lot more big law firms and just markets that we haven't really been able to get into. And they're also bringing a whole new product line online, which are ebooks, which are different than subscriptions, because subscriptions, as you know, through Fastcase and Casemaker, you get for a year. An ebook is essentially, I just like my book kind of like Kindle. I like to read it online. So we've never been able to do that. I hope for users, there's not going to be, actually, there'll probably be a benefit to them, so that if they go through the WSBA storefront, they actually go to the LexisNexis platform, they purchase their book, and I expect they'll probably get a faster turnaround time, because again, LexisNexis is in the business of printing and shipping and warehousing. So hopefully it'll be a win-win for everybody. And again, just, our goal through Deskbooks is to be both as close to revenue neutral as possible, but to also just make these resources readily available. And so things like this allow us to keep doing what we like to do, which is to make these a free resource for all of our law libraries, to offer discounts to new practitioners, solo practitioners, because again, I think our mission value is the more that this resource can be in people's hands, the better.
Thank you, Sarah. Now I think that was the last slide. So if there are any questions as it relates to the reforecast, going once, going twice. So, Carla, Governor Higginson, yeah.
Just a quick question. This may not be for you, Jorge, but last year when we had a presentation on the reforecast, there seemed to be a perception that because the board had received this information, we'd approved it. I don't think this is on for an action item. This is just a report you're giving us. Is that right?
Well, this is a report that I'm providing, but I also expect that the board approve this reforecast so that then we work against these numbers for the remainder of the year.
And so last year, I think we did make one. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we'll need one made now for that.
You're seeking a motion.
Yeah.
So, but if I may just ask one more question, you've actually already implemented these steps. So if we vote to approve this reforecast, or if we didn't take any action, it wouldn't make any difference. The numbers have already shifted. Isn't that true?
Well, the numbers have shifted by virtue of everything that's happening around us. That's one, right, that we can't control, and by virtue of the strategies that we have put in place to be able to mitigate the things that are happening around us.
Like this with the staff, though, those 3 staff have already been. That's already in the works, or they've already been hired. Perhaps I'm not.
No, not at all. No, those have hiring dates where the first one is in July. In the month 7, the other ones are in month 9, month 12, or month 11, as stated in the schedule.
So if we approve the reforecast, we would be approving the hiring of those.
That's correct.
Positions, correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Governor Stevens, did you have a question? Okay, I don't see any other virtual hands or actual hands, and so Treasurer Clark would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Governor Grabicki moves for approval of the budget reforecast. Is that correct, Governor Grabicki?
That is correct.
And Governor Dresden seconds.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I will proceed to a roll call vote. Governor Higginson.
No.
Governor Boyd.
Aye.
Governor Grabicki.
Aye.
Governor Stevens.
Aye.
Governor Peterson.
Yes.
Governor Angeveld.
Aye.
Governor Dresden.
Aye.
Governor Clark.
Aye.
Governor Knight.
Aye.
Governor Abel.
Aye.
Governor Pertzer.
Aye.
Governor McBride.
Aye.
Governor Kang. Governor Williams-Ruth. I have 11 in favor, 1 opposition, no abstentions. That way you have Executive Director Nevin.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, CFO Perez and Director Plachy and Treasurer Clark for that report. And it looks like we have a new budget reforecast, and we can move forward with several important areas, including the member well-being, which, as we've discussed each meeting, is very important, and it's going to do a lot of great things for our members. So appreciate that.
Thanks to all of you for the support.